Okay, hello, I'm Rinus from the Berg, and I'm here on behalf of DSM. It's a company who's sponsoring your school actually. It's here in the south of Holland, but it's a multinational company in food and in raw materials and plastics and medicine. As DSM we promote sustainability. We're one of the most sustainable companies in the world. Actually, 6 times in a row we're the #1 on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, so I'm quite proud to work for that company. One of the things we do is education, and because of that we make a book, which I have a copy there. You can buy it, or I will leave one so you can circulate it, which is called Cradle to Cradle for Kids. And as this book is written for people, kids between 6 and 10 years, and I understood from Anita that the average age here is a bit higher as well, maybe to 14. I add some labels on the slides for, say, to have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. In this presentation I will address 3 chapters. One is people and their stuff. The second one is how nature does things. And the last one is that there's another way to actually produce in a sustainable manner. Well, as you all know, we're here on Earth. Earth is our planet, it's our home. It's the home for the people, the animals, the plants, and it's the only planet and the only home we have. And we're with many people. There's different people, different colors. We work all over the world. You are here the best example in an international school. And I think the main issue of sustainability is respect. Respect for people, respect for your neighbor, respect for your teacher, respect for nature and the objects you have. That's a general input. And of course, equity. To live in this world, we need a job. We need money, we need work. Money is a kind of raw material. It's a beautiful system, beautiful invention, but we have to use it as a tool. And so we need work to gain money and to create a life. And what are we going to do to create a life? What are our needs? What are our comforts? You're very happy here to sit on a chair, and those kids over there, they can, oh no, those are already taken. But a chair is very nice to have, of course, and a bed. So there are essential objects and stuff in our lives which we would like to acquire. We don't get them for free, we have to buy them. And luckily there is a whole industry to provide us with that stuff. And we, as we are here, as humans, are a very important aspect in the whole chain of producing products. We are at the end of the chain. If we in the shop refuse to buy something, then upstream in the chain no one can produce. And if the iPod is not sold, the iPod is not made. In that sense, we have a little bit of control over what is happening in industry. And are you familiar with the words push and pull? Pull is when there's a huge demand, like the iPod. And pull is, for instance, Samsung, who wants to push his phone into the world, into the market, and makes a lot of advertisement for that. So, maybe you have often wondered, if you buy a product, why is it so cheap? How is it possible that such a complex part or product like a radio or a vacuum cleaner costs almost nothing? There's over the 50 to 100 separate parts, all assembled together. And buying something is one thing, but using it is another thing. And using it might have influence on the environment. It might use batteries, or you have to fuel it up, like a car. So think about also the ownership of things you have. And most of the things we buy have a smell. If you smell a new radio, if you smell a new car, if you smell your new clothes, you smell all kinds of perfumes, odors, which some of them are toxic. And we know more or less by nature which smells are good and which are not. And of course, if you buy very cheap, then maybe you buy poor quality. So after a year you have to throw it away, or maybe already after a month. So, and also respect the stuff you have. You can throw it in a corner and it will break, and you say, oh, we throw it away, my mother has enough money, so I buy a new one. No, respect the stuff you have and take care of it properly. So you might wonder, where does all this stuff come from and who's actually making it? Well, this happens in a chain, and we call that the material transformation chain. And it starts with digging in the ground, in the jungle, for instance, for bauxite to make aluminium, or oil, or ores for iron. So it starts with raw materials. And there are many steps. And it's a transformation process. Every time someone does something in this chain and sells it to someone else in the chain to do another thing with it. And oil, of course, is very special raw material. More than 90% of the oil in this world is burned. It's burned in chimneys, in cars, in planes, for heating. Less than 10% is used by the chemical industry to make plastics. And plastics are a very precious raw material and material in general to make products. If you look around, you will notice that many products are made out of plastic. Computers, some of your clothes, shoes. An advantage of plastic is that you can easily mold it in complex shape. And an advantage is that, say that in 100 years or so we run out of oil, that you can use renewable resources from the land or whatever to make plastics. And then, of course, if all these materials are transformed into objects, in screws, in buttons, in casings, in handles, and all kinds of small stuff, you have to assemble them in real products. And then you see that often the producers go to countries with low wages. And maybe it's not always fair. You read in the paper about the misuse of children in making clothes and jeans or whatever. So maybe we should have less love for money and more love in money. Do the proper things with it. But making this and using it, it's sent all over the world. There's a lot of transport. So maybe in India there's a small company who makes the screws for a radio, which is assembled in Africa or assembled in China. So a whole shipload of screws is sent to India and mounted there. Maybe another part, a printing circuit board, and that board is shipped to another part of the world. And so sometimes 2 to 3 times the world is traveled around in order to make a product. And of course that makes also a lot of pollution. By the way, there are 1 million people, more than 1 million people in this particular moment flying in the air. It's a complete large town. That amount of people is in the air. And then of course this process creates pollution. It's something which is already 1,000 years old. If we broke down all the trees and the woods to have wood for our fires in ancient times. But this continues and rapidly the last 200 years with the Industrial Revolution. So making stuff has its drawbacks. And I'm a bit ashamed as older to see these results. While you as kids, no blaming and no shaming, you're not actually making any part of this, but it's the reality. And the reality is that pollution goes from local to global, and from visible to invisible, and from acute to chronic. It's everywhere, and that has to stop. So also this is due to making money in the wrong way, not equity. Stop privatizing profit and socializing cost, which means that someone can say, okay, by producing this I make a lot of dirt, but I throw the dirt over the fence, and let someone else clean it up and put the money in my pocket. That's what I meant with privatizing profit and socializing cost. That should stop, of course. And then using products like cars, like mobile phones, like clothes, all the stuff we make also creates a huge amount of waste. There is a company, it's called Van Gansenwinkel in Liège, which is 20 kilometers south, where you have a giant heap of products, of printers, of vacuum cleaners, of refrigerators, a heap as big as the school there almost. 1 week waste from the Benelux. So it's gigantic. And it's the result of population growth, industry, technology, and of course consumerism. So that's the state of the art, that's what we're doing. And we call this from cradle to grave. We dig it up, we transform, we buy, we use, and at the end of the chain we throw it away. And we throw away, of course, a lot of valuable material. And that has to stop. It's a linear system which has to stop. And by doing so, well, we need at least 6 Earths to have all the supply of raw materials. And we only have 1 Earth. So we have to change, and I mean exactly the producers and all the people involved in making products. So forget about waste, imagine a world without waste, and we can support this by actively doing what we address in the other slides. So that was the first part. The second part is about nature. We can learn a lot of nature. And you see in science nowadays that nature is more and more an example for all kinds of new inventions, for diseases, for new aeroplanes, for designing better clothes. So look at nature and learn from that. And for instance, if you see how nature works, here's this tree, this cherry tree, there's a lot of blossom, and the leaves, they fall and they create compost for the tree themselves. And then of course we can use that tree as a raw material. We can cut one, not all of them of course, leave something behind. And we can use the wood, we can eat the cherries, and we can use the leaves for creating compost. And everything which falls down on the ground finally is eaten by all kinds of microorganisms. And they in turn transform the food and the leaves and everything which is over there into nutrients. And the nutrients are again the basis to grow new trees. So you see in nature nothing is lost. The concept of waste does not exist. And it's a circular system. And that actually is what we should do also in making products. And of course, cradle to cradle is a kind of a hype in general, thinking about sustainability in society, in companies, is all more than 50 years old. And you see now that cradle to cradle is blending with all kinds of thoughts, like the natural step, like the circular economy, like there are various ways and concepts to think about a better future, a more sustainable future. Well, cradle to cradle is one of them, and there are 3 main principles. They say, forget about waste. Waste doesn't exist. Waste is food. Use solar energy. If you have heard it on the radio that there is in this neighborhood, a Roermond, a centrale who produce electricity and a power plant, and it has to shut down. And why? Because the current, the electricity imported from Germany, produced by windmills and by solar energy, is so cheap that they can just close it and stop burning natural gas or stop burning oil and coal. So that's exactly what we want. Use solar energy. And of course celebrate diversity. Respect your friends, respect different people, respect the animals, respect the whole society. So in this way of thinking, there is the use of renewable resources. You can reuse them endlessly. I addressed already oil, where oil can be made from plants, and oil as a renewable raw material can be used to make plastics. In that sense, also recycling is a way of renewable resources. If we close the chain, then you don't have to use new raw materials every time. So then we produce goods in a different way, in different circumstances, in better circumstances, in clean environments, with equity. And then all the products we make, sometimes I complain to my wife that she bought something which I don't like. And then she said, yeah, but I can buy it. Well, that's exactly the problem we have. So we should go to a society where everything is in the shop is okay, is responsible, is clean, doesn't pollute. And nowadays you must always be a scientist to read all the labels and to say, what is in it? Is this good? Is this the right label? Or is this a wrong label? Or blah, blah, blah. You need a lot of knowledge to know what you can actually buy. And then, of course, using it and enjoy it and respect it. And then after that, everything is weared out. Or your clothes are becoming too small, or your shoes you have to renew, or your bicycle is too small or is defect. So after end of use, you have to do something with it. And that's starting with recycling, bringing it back. And then finally, waste is food. So all the stuff we have produced, we have sold, we have used and brought back in the system, finally is the food for a new process to start again and make stuff. In this cradle-to-cradle philosophy, there's a very important notion. It's the notion that if you read an advertisement of a car manufacturer that said, this car is better for the environment. And that's a lie, of course. No car is good for the environment. So what it should say is, this car is less bad for the environment. A little bit less consumption, a little bit less pollution, but it's still polluting. And what Cradle to Cradle proposes is a complete new technology where actually the thing we buy or produce are beneficial, are delivering something. They give more than they take, so to speak. Imagine that the tires, you all know the tires from a car, that they wear out. So you have to change your tires after a year or after 2 years. What happened to that dirt, to the dust which came off of that tire? It's polluting and it's somewhere. Imagine that we can make tires out of stuff which is compost, which is a fertilizer. That means that if I drive, that on the side of the road, the plants say, thank you, Mr. van den Berg, that you passed by, because now I feel a lot better. That's an example of being beneficial and of being good instead of less bad. We call that in cradle-to-cradle terms, we call that eco-effectiveness. And design is a very important aspect in this whole chain. Of course, you as consumers and we and me as consumers are most important, because we can say, I buy it or I don't buy it. I use it, I like it or I don't like it. So if you don't like it, then everything upstream in the chain will stop, because nobody is buying it. So nobody will produce it, because it will cost you money. Another important step in this chain is the moment that someone says, please make me this cup. Make me this cup. That's an important, a contractor or a client or a customer. And then the designer should say, okay, what kind of cup do you want? Well, I want a cup which is disposable, maybe compostable. I want a cup which is good for the to keep warm drinks, whatever it is. So, in fact, with design, it's the creation of a product. With design, it's the birth of a product. And You could say that design is the interface between matter and market. And doing good or making shit starts there. Another aspect of Cradle to Cradle is the notion that you can give something back to Earth. As I said in the previous slides, that you could use, say, plants to create oil and use that oil to make plastics, then you take away from the land. And what is important is that in this circle you give something back to the land, so that in the form of fertilizer. Yeah. And of course we have all to support the recycling. Yes, we can, and yes, we should do it. And be critical as an active user. Think about what do I have in hand? Where is it made of? What can I do with it? And think about, say, new applications. Be yourself a designer. So, in the end, we live in a beautiful planet, and we have beautiful technology to create a better world. And this is what, more or less in a nutshell, Cradle to Cradle want to represent. Thank you for the attention. Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you. Success.